The precision armory under Naval Base Coronado wasn't a room so much as a principle. Light without glare, air without dust, order without question. People entered only if their names lived behind 3 doors and an oath. Commander Elias Rourke had lived in that oath for 15 years. He knew the hum of the filtered vents the way a sailor knows the pitch of a good engine. He stopped because something broke the pattern. Through the safety glass of Bay 7 stood a woman in civilian clothes, sleeves rolled above her wrists, auburn hair pinned with a plain clip. On the stainless table, a CHATAC intervention, .408, taken down to bright anatomy, bolt apart, barrel free, stock resting like a folded wing. Her motions weren't tentative. They were quiet, fluent, almost boring in the way only mastery becomes. Rourke keyed through the scanner, the heavy doors sighed, and the room's hush accepted him. "Ma'am," he said, command voice even and edged. "That system isn't for contractors. Step away." She didn't look up. She ran a lintless patch through the barrel, checked crown and rifling, set the rod aside. "I know," she said. 3 soft syllables, perfectly certain. Rourke moved nearer, counting exits the way habit requires. "You're in a compartment you cannot even name." "I can name the errors in the last service cycle," she murmured, finally meeting his eyes. Brown, steady, unstartled. Microscopic pitting on the lands at 7 o'clock, 32 centimeters from throat. It will throw you right at long angles unless you reseat the optic and correct for drift. "That's classified work," he said. "Who are you?" She tapped the receiver with a finger scarred in half moons. "Today, I'm Mara Quinn, calibration tech. Tomorrow, they'll write a different name on the badge. The rifle doesn't care either way." Rourke felt anger arriving late and caution arriving on time. Bay 7 was a place for trusted hands and recorded tools. She carried neither. He should have keyed an alert. He didn't. Something about the ease of her movements, no performance, no brag, made him choose to ask, not order. "How did you get through that door?" "By not knocking," she said, and set the bolt on its mat like a sleeping animal. What shook him wasn't her calm. He'd sparred with calm before. It was what she knew next. "The annex flagged your complaint about Nix 9's maintenance lag," she said, nodding at the CHATAC. "You signed it 19 days ago, time-stamped at 0208. You used the term unacceptable. You rarely use absolutes." Rourke kept his face still. The memo lived behind layers he hated and obeyed. "Nix 9. Her mouth curved. "You call it the CHATAC to its face. In the ledger, it's Nix 9. Serial ends in 14. Barrel 2. 10,714 recorded rounds. Max engagement 2,876 meters under crosswind. High altitude, air." His throat went dry. Only 5 people had read that footnote. He crossed to the terminal because disbelief is a kind of superstition and proof, however much you fear it, cleans the corners. He slid his cac, breathed through the prompts, and reached for a directory he'd never been allowed to see. A gray square blinked, then yielded. */thrush. Need to know. He only knew because the room decided he would. A page populated. Log entries without adjectives, columns of density and angle, no names at all. At the bottom, asset, Vesper, strike counts, locations bridged by latitude and mercy. No ballistic computer, no drone slave to her eye, just math and a human tolerance for consequence. Rourke shut the file because too much truth can make noise. "Vesper," he said, as if saying a weather pattern aloud could make it change course. "That you?" "Names are receipts," she said. "Sometimes the cashier loses them. You should have pressed a panic pedal, let the system swallow her and decide what to spit out." He didn't. "What happens in?" He checked the wall clock. 4 hours. "Window," she answered. "High plateau. Cold air." A man who believes he can outweight gravity. "Whose chain are you in?" "The kind that ends at a desk under a mountain and begins nowhere you can point to on a map." "What do you want from me?" She slid the barrel back toward the receiver. "Space. No alarms. Someone inside the building who will keep the wrong question from being asked." 2 hours later, it got simpler and harder at once. Rourke's secure phone pulsed. Unknown number. Known handshake. A single text. Basilisk/wisteria. Maintain distance. Stand clear. Stand clear. The phrase were a polite suit over a shove. He thought of folded flags and rooms where the word acceptable became a scale and a shrug. He typed back, listening. 3 dots appeared and vanished, like a surface breaking. Then, wisteria, need to know. Delay is harm. He walked back to the vault because he had already decided which ritual to break. The room smelled of solvent and quiet. The rifle lay whole again. A canvas tool roll rested beside it, edges worn to softness, pockets stitched not like gear, but like memory. Mara, or Vesper, or whoever she was when no one asked, was tying it closed. He glanced at what lay inside. Not just what you'd expect. Wrenches, pins, a wind meter, but oddities. A narrow awl, thread, a short pencil bitten down almost to blood, clear vials filled with nothing but air, labeled with dates and places. You bottle wind, he said, unable to help it. I bottle stories about it, she corrected. Air isn't empty. It's a crowded room. Temperature, humidity, terrain memory. It carries receipts. He nodded toward a stack of laminated cards tucked under the sling. And that, my shorthand. I think in colors, and wind doesn't argue with that. What do you call yourself when they aren't calling you? He asked, half a joke to loosen a knot in his chest. She hesitated, then gave him something he understood was not a gift they gave easily. Prism, because you bend light. Because I break it without losing any. A flicker of humor warmed the words and vanished like a match in daylight. Why me? He asked as they walked the service corridor, where paint curled like old paper. Because you looked at the rifle like a promise, not a trophy. Because you didn't reach for a phone before you reached for a question. Because somebody always needs to keep the hallway clear. He hated how reasonable that felt. He hated how necessary it had always been. The plane they took wasn't on the schedule. It was a tired bird with the stubborn heart of anything that has made itself useful past the date someone wrote down. Rourke wasn't on any manifest. Doors had a way of opening for men who looked like they belonged to problems. He sat across from Mara and watched her breathe like a metronome set to patience. The case lay at her knees as if it were sleeping. They touched down on a cold strip of highway lit by theft. The air but like new coins. A driver who knew when not to exist took them into mountains that only pretended to be still. Language changed at a checkpoint. Mara changed with it as easily as shifting her weight. They climbed the last stretch on foot. Gravel slid, then held. The sky unfolded and became a ceiling you could not touch. At the top, if tops exist for things this old, they lay on their bellies and let their lungs become part of the stone. Across the broken bowl of valley, a compound pretended to be a goat farm by permitting goats and ignoring that goats don't need parabolic antennas. How far? Rourke asked, knowing the answer would arrive in a form he hadn't learned. She said a number and then 2 more, then a word he didn't know. It sounded like a color. He believed it anyway. Her setup was not a catalog spread. No tripod spine winking at the sky. No sensor tree. A bipod barely taller than a fist, a small bag under her cheek, the case zipped and slid under her ribs to make the world level. She watched fog scrape along a gully, watched the way smoke from a cooking fire didn't stand straight but dragged its foot. She wrote a mark on a card with a pencil that had seen more borders than most men. Raven, he asked. Air overhead, his habit insisted. Eyes above. Too noisy, she said. Tonight wants whispers. The radio in his ear cracked once with a personality he didn't recognize. Not command, not a friend, a function. Prism confirm eyes. Confirm clear. She didn't answer with words. She let the rifle answer by fitting itself to her bones. Target. Busy man, she said. Pays men to carry his name in front of him like a shield. Like skylights. Rourke breathed into his sleeve and tasted aluminum and old fear. They waited while time simplified itself. A door opened in the long building. Not dramatic. No speeches, no swiveling cameras. Simply the routine movement of a man who had ordered the world to treat his schedule like weather. He stepped into a corridor lit in panels, glass overhead, glass to the long yard, glass behind, so he could see himself belong to everything. 2 guards ghosted him, bored and sharp. When? Rourke whispered, because silence can choke you if you let it. 2 acts, she said. One low, one rude, less polite down the gully. Density pretending to be thinner than it is. The mountains telling lies it told yesterday, too. That helps. He didn't ask about range. Numbers were not their enemy. Witnesses were. Prism, the ear voice insisted, hungry this time. Clock is unfriendly. Take or don't. You don't have to, Rourke said, surprising himself with how little he meant it and how much he needed to say it. I never have to, she whispered. That's why they asked me. Her right hand smoothed. Her left became a hinge. The rifle found its consent. The valley paused in the particular quiet that isn't silence but agreement. Rourke closed his eyes because some prayers are private even to atheists. When the shot happened, it didn't feel like sound. It felt like the world choosing a different version of itself. For long heartbeats later, a pane in the skylight breathed out and returned as glitter to a floor no one would step on for a very long time. The walking man pitched, not in drama, but in correction, a life stepping to a mark it couldn't see. Impact clean, said the voice in his ear, contemptuous of awe. The compound didn't scream. It tightened, light hardened into shapes with assignments. Outside the valley, along a road that believed in its own innocence, a checkpoint decided to be very careful with a truck it had been ignoring. Mara did not lift her head. She watched the corridor's emptiness as if stories sometimes beg for a second ending. Then she breathed. We're done. How do we? The way we came, she said. They packed in the efficient choreography of people who understand where debt hides. The last 10 meters, the last 5 steps, the part where you think you're safe. On the downhill, the wind found Rourke's pulse like a finger on a wrist. He let the mountain keep a little of his balance and a lot of his mood. He let the Hilux swallow them and become a rumor. The strip was colder on the way out, as if victory takes heat with it. The pilot made the sign that means we're leaving fast without saying it aloud. Mara rested her boot on the tool roll to keep it from skating, hands folded like a person practicing stillness. Rourke's secure phone shivered once. He pretended flesh and glass shared rules and ignored it. Prism, he said softly, trying on a code name, finding that it fit. What happens when they decide to make you official? She smiled without opening her eyes. They'll invent a badge, then a biography, then a funeral no one can attend. If they write too much, someone will erase it. If they erase too much, she paused, met his gaze at last. Someone has to remember the parts that matter. He thought of the young operators he'd sent to places they were too young to know how to hate. He thought of the times a problem vanished before his team boarded a bird. He'd called it luck, or intel, or policy shifting in their favor. He understood those words were curtains. He had just met the window. The plane rose through air packed in layers. Exhaust cold, the gray taste of coming dawn. By the time their wheels kissed concrete back at Coronado, a different day had arranged itself for public consumption. He walked with her through corridors that pretended not to have angles. Someone in civilian clothing held a door that never unlocked for him before and didn't need to now. Debrief, she said. You sit. You nod. When they say stand clear, here makes space. Is that the same thing? For people with credit cards, she said. For the rest of us, it's a question about courage. The room they used pretended to be a conference room. Whiteboard wiped past usefulness, chairs that squeaked on purpose. A folder sat centered like a crosshair. Wisteria, read the heavy type. Compartmentalized. Eyes only. The admiral who entered wore the expression of a man composing 2 paragraphs for 2 audiences and hoping they didn't swap pages. Target removed, he said almost kindly. 0 collateral. Narrative goes to partner agency. Official record is closed. He pushed the folder toward Rourke without touching it more than necessary. You weren't on the plane. You weren't on a hill. You don't know her. Mara stood near the door as if gravity had singled her out for attention. No rank, no ribbon, no handshake for the man whose life had just become marginally easier because she was good at math and hard at making mistakes. She didn't look at Rourke. He didn't look away. The admiral dipped his head to the ritual. Stand clear, he said. It wasn't unkind. It was lazy. Rourke heard his own voice answer without asking permission. I'll make space. A muscle in the Admiral's cheek twitched. He gathered his pen, his reassurances, and left the room to the two people it had only loaned itself to. At the threshold, Mara paused. She didn't give him an oath or a warning. She didn't tell him not to be a hero. Heroes need to be told, and men like Rourke mostly don't. She said, if they erase me, remember why. Because it saved boys I know, he said. Because it saves strangers you'll never know, she corrected. And then she was gone, absorbed by a hallway designed to forget and very good at its job. He should have gone home. He didn't. He walked to Bay 7 because the vault held the only conversation that wasn't going to lie to him today. The light accepted him. The table was polished. Nix. 9 sat in its case with a latch laid flat, waiting for the next name it would wear. He picked up one of the laminated cards she'd left on purpose or by accident. It wasn't a ballistic table. It was a diary written in a language that trusted no one to translate it correctly. Slope scribbles, density shorthand, a corner marked with a tiny, almost invisible colored triangle. He understood nothing and believed everything. A junior tech poked a head through the door, saw a commander standing with a card in his hand, and retreated like a tide. Rourke slid the card back under the sling and shut the case gently. His phone buzzed again. The message was a photograph of a skylight restored to ordinary. The caption read, "Maintenance complete." He barked a short laugh that did not amuse him and texted back nothing. Some correspondence earns its silence. On his way out, he signed the work order he was supposed to sign, the kind that keeps the database from asking follow-up questions. Maintenance verified, he wrote. System within tolerance. He thought of people as systems. He thought of tolerance not as compromise, but as capacity. He wondered how much of his had been used and how soon the next draw would come. Days passed in the way days do in buildings that never get truly dark. Training schedules. After-action reports that read like dry prayers. Briefings about places where calm was an unnatural state and panic ordinary weather. Mara, or Prism, or Vesper, or whoever the ledger asked her to be, appeared twice without announcement and vanished twice without footprint. Once he found a thread on his desk, green as bottle glass, coarse. He turned it under his thumb, smiled at the audacity of a message that wasn't. Once he found a tiny vial no bigger than a bullet, labeled with coordinates that, when he traced them, mapped onto a ridge 30 miles from where they had been. The vial was empty. He uncapped it and inhaled and tasted rain. On a Friday that pretended to be softer than the others, he caught his reflection and didn't know him for a blink. There was a tiredness to him that wasn't new and a steadiness that was. He went to the sea wall and let the Pacific talk over him a while. The ocean never asked for permission to be huge. He admired that. His phone offered a headline written by hands that had never held a bolt or a string. Regional actor pledges reform. Coalition partners support stability. He thought of glass falling like bright confetti no one clapped for. He put the phone in his pocket and left it to want things without him. He had always believed in chain of command. He still did. He had added a new belief. In the chain of care, the line of people who keep halls quiet enough for difficult work to happen unphotographed. The last time he saw her, there was no rifle between them. She stood at the edge of the pier at dawn, hair down, hands bare, looking like someone who could afford to feel the day start without bargaining with it. He stepped beside her and didn't say her name because names have rules. The ocean licked the pilings. Gulls wrote rude cursive over the water. They're going to ask for a story about last week, he said. They're going to ask for proof that the story happened, she replied. They'll settle for a ribbon and a press release about nothing useful. I can vouch for the nothing, he said. She smiled with her mouth and not her eyes. I know. He wanted to ask if this ends. He wasn't sure for whom he was asking. It ends for everybody, she said, which wasn't comfort and wasn't meant to be. For some of us, it ends in a quiet kitchen, for others with paperwork, for others in a room where the air is too clean. What matters isn't the ending. It's what you bought before the receipt printed. He watched a fishing boat draw a clean line out of the harbor. If they erase you, he said, tell me I'm allowed to write you down. Might be the last honest thing you do, she said. Be the backup. People like me don't get headstones. We get a handful of people who refuse to forget. He nodded. They stood. The light came on all the way. Somewhere, a training bell rang. Somewhere, a young operator jogged a little faster because the world had been nudged an inch in his favor by someone who would never stand in front of his platoon and take applause. Rourke didn't salute. He didn't reach for her hand. He didn't say be careful because saying so never helped. He said, I'll make space. She answered like a promise you only give once. I know. And when she left, as the sea continued its old argument with the shore, as a base woke all at once, as the day prepared to lie politely for public use, he did the only thing some men are built to do. He remembered. He kept the hallways quiet. He believed in receipts. He wrote down the truth where the system couldn't find it. He kept a card in his desk that made no sense to anyone else. Because some ghosts don't haunt. They hold. They hold doors long enough for other people to get through. They hold stories until they're safe enough to tell. They hold their breath until wind says okay. And when a rifle somewhere chooses a different world in the space between two hearts, he stands at his small post in a large machine and does the one job he was asked to do. He makes space.